I have major depression, generalized anxiety, PTSD, and OCD. Those are my. I used to also have another diagnosis called PMDD, and it's where a woman's experience is very severe PMS. And I no longer have that condition because I've had a full hysterectomy, and that resolved that issue.
Does PTSD, what is that? What is that about for you? You don't have to tell me the whole details, but what is it? What do you experience in
The PTSD is an acronym for post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I have PTSD from growing up in an abusive household with a parent that was physically abusive towards me. And I grew up in a lot of fear of being physically harmed a lot. And then as an adult, I have PTSD from being a victim of a violent crime in my own home. I was robbed and beaten and sexually assaulted in my own home about 11 years ago. It's actually how I came to NAMI. And then more recently, about 6 years ago, from the death of my only child. It causes you to have reoccurring thoughts of those instances. Sometimes for me, irrational fears. Like after I was robbed, I used to think people were following me all the time, that they clearly were not. I used to think people were following me in their cars, and they were just innocent people driving down the road that were not following me. After my daughter passed away, I couldn't go to certain places that she and I used to go to together because it would bring up memories of her and I being there, and it would become overwhelming and upsetting. So certain things can trigger my mind to have like a PTSD sort of episode. For me, those on the severe side, when my PTSD is very severe, those would include panic attacks, at which I would have to take Xanax or Valium for. I can say that I haven't had a severe PTSD panic attack probably maybe 3 or 4 years now. I'm grateful to have those under control at the moment. Knock on wood that it stays that way.
It's a stereotype, right, that only soldiers get PTSD.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody can experience PTSD following a traumatic event in their life. The important thing is to seek help, seek therapy, and work through whatever trauma was that happened to you, and learn coping skills so that when those situations arrive in your life, such as a panic, attack, that you're able to talk yourself down and help yourself, soothe yourselves, or have a plan, or know what to do to cope with the thoughts and feelings that you're having. And that's something that's learned, and it's hard to learn, and it's a lot of work. But people that live with those disorders, they're so frightening and awful that most of the time we're willing to put in the work to make learning how to cope with those situations better. And I definitely have put my time in to learn how to cope with that. And I believe that's why I haven't really been afflicted with that in the last few years.
With that, I experience the following thing, but it's a different reason than you do. I experience it because of my schizoaffective disorder, I think. Like I used to think the FBI was after me or whatever. And I know that's a lot of cases in the first onset, especially, or a lot of people that have psychotic disorders. So that just something I want to mention.
You've probably heard of PTSD, but have you ever heard of complex PTSD? That's when traumatic events, often from childhood, affect your brain long term and can affect your closest relationships. So tonight, we speak to a health advocate about how to identify this kind of trauma and do something about it.
There's often a lot of shame and stigma associated with trauma, but the paradox is there's a lot of healing and storytelling and sharing and opening up.
Sarah Church is an author and health advocate who's experienced what's called complex PTSD. That condition happens due to childhood trauma that's never resolved, and it impacts the brain long term.
Symptoms often include flashbacks, nightmares, and triggers to cues that remind you of the traumatic experience from the past.
That past unresolved trauma can cause a lifetime of damage to your health and well-being.
One can be difficulty dealing with emotions. A second thing could be like a diminished sense of worth, excessive shame and guilt. And the third common thing is a difficulty sustaining relationships or really feeling connected to others.
And complex PTSD is more common than you might think. According to the CDC, 61% of U.S. adults have experienced at least one traumatic event in their life. And children who grow up in an abusive home and don't seek help as adults may see that unresolved trauma come out in other ways, like with substance abuse, overeating, overworking, anxiety, difficulty sleeping, and physical pain. Then experts say many will unintentionally pass along their trauma to others. Church did that too and says she lost her marriage over it. But now she leans on a combination of tools to help her stay healthy.
So I have a toolbox now that I can recognize what's happening, which is a big improvement from not even knowing or recognizing, and then B, I generally know which tool to pull out of the toolbox.
Meanwhile, Church says healing from complex PTSD can be helped by talking to a licensed mental health therapist who specializes in trauma and seeking other treatments for trauma, including memory reprocessing like EMDR and accelerated resolution therapy, ART, neurofeedback, and wellness practices like writing and meditation. Church is also the author of a new book, Mending My Mind. We've included a link to that and more information on our website. Head over to abcactionnews.com/rebound.
The biggest news of the day, Tom Brady calls it quits. He says this time is real. He also retired on February 1st last year and then came back. The greatest of all time, Tom Brady, is done this time. Will he try to repair his marriage? We'll see about that. After 7 Super Bowls later, he's retired. He won his first Super Bowl after driving it down to the field goal to win the Super Bowl by Adam Vinatieri. It was a great drive. And then at that time, the St. Louis Rams, 2004, maybe it was realized that he was great. Maybe in February of 2017, it was more that he was the best ever. And then he got 2 more Super Bowls in his 6th and 7th Super Bowl. Even I have to admit, he wasn't my favorite, but did just some jealousy come through? Of course. The Chiefs went 50 years without winning a Super Bowl. The Jayhawks controlled the game throughout, winning by 12 against Kansas State. Kevin McCullough Jr. leads the Jayhawks with 16 in the loss. Keontae Johnson had 22 and 13 rebounds for Kansas State. Both McCullough and Johnson finished with a double-double. Now we go on to the standings for the Big 12. Texas in first place, 7-2. Iowa State is in second with a win over Kansas. These teams are all now 6-3. TCU Horned Frogs 6-3. Kansas, I expect Kansas to finish 1 or 2 in the conference. Kansas State falls to 5th after losing to Kansas last night. Baylor's in 6th. To check out more, visit this link. Clemson gets beat at home by Boston College in an upset last night. Indiana loses to unranked Maryland 75-69. Also, Clemson was 20. San Diego State also lost to an unranked school in Nevada. Now we go on to the college basketball, Mizzou and LSU. Mizzou is favored by 10. I'll take them by 10, 83-73. Mizzou best player is Kobe Brown. If he's healthy and staying out of foul trouble, another good player is Damari Hodge, especially if he's hitting threes. Mizzou's playing good defense. Mizzou really relies off of good defense and hitting threes. You say most teams may, but Missouri really relies on threes and defense and steals. Missouri does struggle in the rebound department, so watch for that tonight. Rest of the top 25 scores right now. Purdue leads Penn State 18-51 to go 38-31. Xavier, number 16, leads number 17. Florida in an upset so far, but they're very, very early on, 2013 over number 2, Tennessee. Auburn leads Georgia 30-14. Auburn is 25th. Marquette and Villanova, who is 10-11, and Marquette is 17-5 and 14th, tip off at 7:30 on Fox. Mizzou tips off on the SEC Network. Jerry Jones says Mike McCarthy will call the plays for the Cowboys. Some people think this is insane. The Denver Broncos hired Sean Payton yesterday. Also, D'Amico Ryan is now a Texan. Here's more on that on those links. This is Sam Vaughan for Sam Sports Report.